The Eagles have lost the last 4 of 5 games to end the year. This one was probably the worst of them all. A loss against the New York Giants starting Tyrod Taylor in a tire fire of a season for the New York Giants. The Giants' offensive line, abysmal. A bunch of the quarterbacks are top 10 in sacks. It's bad. Tommy DeVito, Tyrod Taylor, and then you had Daniel Jones, of course. They had a bunch of quarterbacks, very poor offensive line. The defense was underwhelming this year. Wink Martindale actually resigned as DC of the Giants. This entire season has been crazy, but somehow the Eagles still found a way to lose once again to a team who should be very inferior to them. I want to know, and this is bad. I'll bring up the numbers right now. These are the defensive numbers for the Eagles. We thought they were good with Matt Patricia potentially changing it. No, they just got progressively worse. Total defense 26th, offensive opponent points per game 30th, opponent passing yards per game 31st, opponent passing touchdowns 31st, opponent third down percentage 31st, opponent red zone percentage 30th, opponent passing rating 29th. Horrible defense through and through, and this is the team that just came back from potentially we're this close to beating the Kansas City Chiefs and winning the Super Bowl. I want to know this time they're heading to Tampa. They're 3-point favorites against Tampa. How far do you think that this Eagles team can make it in the playoffs?
Not very far. I think they have a good chance to beat Tampa, although they are playing at Tampa. They beat them in the week 3, 25-11. Tampa's defense isn't a whole lot better. They're ranked 29th. The Eagles 31st against the pass, and the Tampa 29th against the pass. Tampa is good against the run. And, the Eagles have a decent running game, right? With Swift, isn't that Swift they have? And also Jalen Hurts. But Jalen Hurts is hurt. He's banged up. He hurt his finger. He dislocated his middle finger on his passing hand. It wasn't broken, but I got to believe it hurts a lot after you dislocate it, right?
Right.
So it's going to be a little bit of an issue for him. I think this game will be very close against Tampa Bay and the Eagles, and there is a chance that Tampa Bay might be able to win it. It all depends on how well Baker Mayfield plays, who played terrible last week. They are lucky they won that game 9-0.
Well, when it comes to this Eagles team, I had them repeating and at least heading to the Super Bowl. I think it's safe to say that they won't even make it to the Super Bowl. I don't think they'll make the conference championship, and I think there is a very high likelihood they don't even make it to the divisional game. Because what did we just see? I understand Jalen Hurts got hurt, but let's take a look at how Hurts was playing before he got injured. He was 7 of 16 for 55 yards and an interception. The Giants, Tyrod Taylor had a tremendous game. 23 of 32, 297 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. I don't think Jalen Hurts would have led that team to victory anyway. The defense is too bad. Jalen Hurts is too banged up. And by the way, this season, because they're not having these explosive plays, the turnovers that Jalen Hurts is committing are not negated by explosive plays and them scoring touchdowns. It's by their defense, after Jalen Hurts turns the ball over, the defense giving up points. And because their red zone percentage is so bad, we'll bring up the number once again. Red zone percentage, if we look at it, is 30th. They're not holding them the field goals. They're holding them the touchdowns. So we're going from a 0 to 7 points for the other team. This Eagles team is shocking. And I think really we need to take a look at 2 things. One, the loss of Jonathan Gannon and the loss of Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen, we're working with Herbert, and now working with Jalen Hurts. We saw how great those quarterbacks can be. Now, without Shane Steichen on the offensive side, less explosive plays, less dominant offense. The offensive line is now giving up a bunch of pressures. It hasn't been good. Now, look at the defense now. Jonathan Gannon goes to the Cardinals. We think, okay, Desai's in. They also have Matt Patricia as a senior defensive guy. Everything should be fine. And lo and behold, the defense is, I don't even think abysmal is the right word. The defense has been terrible. Absolutely terrible. And it's not for a lack of talent. They brought in a bunch of pieces that should, fulfill their talent. And they're underperforming, just not as good as we thought. They're a bad defense this season. And Jalen Hurts this season has not been able to overcome that poor defense. Now, in this game against the Bucs, which we'll get into on Friday when we make our picks, we don't know if Devontae Smith is good to go. We don't know if A.J. Brown's good to go. We don't know if Jalen Hurts is good to go fully. For me, I don't think that'll matter. And let's say, because of the injuries to Smith and to Brown, they can't go. I don't think Jalen Hurts will trust his guys enough for that next man up. I don't think they could run the ball effectively enough against the Tampa defense, who, besides last year, in Brady's last year with Tampa, their rush defense has been one of the best in the league. I don't think this team will be good enough to even beat Tampa. I don't think Baker needs to play particularly well. I just think the Eagles are really that bad. Now, when they played them earlier on in the year, it was I believe it was a Monday game. They beat them 25-11. The yardage was very, very. It was a stark difference. 472 yards for the Eagles to 174 for the Bucs. I think two things are changing. One, the Eagles were very early on in the season. We didn't see the gaping holes. They were still a viable team for the Super Bowl. And Baker Mayfield with the Bucs early, they needed to get a rhythm going, needed to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they need to figure out how to gel with one another and work. And Baker, at the end of the season, while it hasn't looked good in the past 2 games, they've been winning a decent amount of those. So I'm fearful if I'm an Eagles fan. I'm mortified if I'm Nick Sirianni. I think if he goes out and loses to Baker, loses another game to an inferior team or a team that should be inferior, I think he's on the hot seat.
I don't think they'll.
I think he'd be on the hot seat.
They're not going to let him go this year. I mean, he was in the Super Bowl just last
Correct.
year. I think that they were good until they ran into that stretch where they played so many hard teams, and they managed to pull those games out at the end. It took a lot out of them.
Right.
And then after that, they played the Cowboys in Dallas, and they lost that game badly. They've never been the same.
Right.
And whether they can recapture some of the earlier year brilliance that they had, they looked like the best team in the NFL. I was picking them. I said they're going all
Before
the way
the 49er
this year.
game,
They really, before the 49er game, I was picking them, and I said, wow, they look like the best team. I think that there's a fraction on the defense where the defensive coordinator has kind of been demoted, and they let Matt Patricia call the plays, and the defensive coordinator up in the booth. It's weird. I think that's got to be something that's upsetting to the. I'm surprised the head coach would allow something like that. I think that has a bearing on how poorly they're playing on defense. It's just a weird setup, and it's not. It doesn't. Who's the leader? Who is the head of the defense? Is it the coordinator, or is it Matt Patricia? I don't know. When the guy's calling the plays is usually the one that's the leader. So it's weird. I don't understand that. So I think they're in trouble in the game at Tampa. They're playing on the road. They've been losing. They're on a losing streak here. They lost to the Giants badly. Their quarterback is banged up. Their wide receivers are banged up. The Bucs look to be pretty healthy, and they have excellent wide receivers. If Baker just plays a decent game, I think they have a very good chance to win, the Bucs. Yeah,
I would agree with that. And Jalen Hurts, he has been, I don't know if it's injuries. I don't know if it's just poor play. Something is going on with Jalen, because he does not. We saw him earlier on in the year running to go get a first down, and he looks like he's walking to go. He's limping or something.
He has a knee injury. He's
had
a knee
injured.
injury most of the
Right.
year.
And the fact that he doesn't show up on injury reports, no one's really talking about it when it comes to the Eagles. And now A.J. Brown is reportedly, toxic in the locker room, and everyone's. We saw it in a win. They were dominating in a win against the Vikings. And we saw A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, it seems like, arguing on the sidelines. And that was earlier on in the year. That was the second game of the season. Now, it ended up being only a 6-point win. However, the Eagles were up big, about midway, 3/4 of the way into that game. And we saw A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, seems like they were arguing between one another. So I think that may be starting something where, Brown, that toxicness, it could have rooted from there in game 2. And they kept winning games, and they lost a weird one to the Jets when Jalen Hurts played horrible. This Eagles team is not a Super Bowl team. I don't think it's not a good team. It's not a great team. It's a pretty bad team. And they're very, very grateful that the first, 10 or so games of the season were pretty easy. And they're able to come out with wins there against the Patriots. By the way, they almost lost, and they gave, and that should have been the root. We should have definitely perked our ears a little bit more at Mac Jones having a career year in Week 1, 310 yards, 3 touchdowns, the first time he ever did that. And if it weren't for Keyshawn Booty not knowing how to toe tap on a sideline, the Patriots may have beaten them in week 1. And we'd be sitting here saying, okay, let's see the wins that Mac Jones had against the Eagles, against the Bills. 2 pretty good wins, and they would have been 2 come-from-behind victories, game-winning drives. Now the Bills were the only one he had that against, but that should have made us think a little bit. The Commanders gave him a lot of trouble throughout the season. Now, they pulled it out on both ends of that, but a lot of trouble. Sam Howell, could he be the quarterback of the Commanders? It turns out, I don't know about that. Probably not.
No, it's just that the Eagles' defense stinks.
Right. The Cowboys, who have had trouble with the Eagles.
They lost the first game against them.
And Dak in big games, we've seen him struggle. They nearly beat the Cowboys nearly beat him the first time around, and then that second game, they got crushed by the Cowboys. So I think it's good. It's interesting. Even we see Kansas City offensively in the second half, they struggled to put up points. The game was a 4-point victory. It was 4 points. The Chiefs nearly beat them with one of the youngest receiving corps in the NFL, and Mahomes having his worst season of his entire career. Nearly beat this Eagles team. So I think we may be, maybe fixated too much on what they did last year and how athletic and incredible Jalen Hurts' talent is. But I think if you really take a hard look at it, this team is not good. Coaching, it seems like Nick Sirianni's just a walk-around guy. I don't see a lot of, passion when it comes to coaching and making sure everything's okay. He seems to just be walking around, just sort of being a spectator. And when he beat the Chiefs, that's when he got vocal. It's when he was yelling at the Chiefs fans. And since then, team's fallen apart. So maybe his priorities are in the wrong place. Yeah, you did beat the Chiefs, but look at you now. One of the worst defenses in the NFL. Your team is falling apart. Culture-wise, Jalen Hurts talking about the amount of effort and commitment.
He lost his defensive coordinator and his offensive coordinator off-season last year. They both went to be head coaches elsewhere.
Right, and we mentioned the offseason. We don't know how big of an impact that is. Is it Jalen Hurts' ability or is it the coaches? And it turns out
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the coaches is a big thing. And they've proven that they don't have it. And this crazy thing on defense, where the defensive coordinator up in the booth and Matt Patricia calling the defensive plays, I don't get it.
It is a very, very interesting situation. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, if you want to check out the full episode, make sure you click the I in the top right-hand corner right now. If you want to listen to this show anywhere you go, make sure you go to anchor.fm/The Harvey Hour or anywhere you get your podcasts.